so much for joining me today, Ruth. I really appreciate it. I'm very excited for today. If you don't mind introducing yourself to anyone who's listening, and we can get started.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Emma. So I'm Ruth Reynolds. I work in Havas Media as technology director. So that kind of involves a lot of ad tech for clients. Obviously, we're a media agency, we run ads. So we have to make sure that the platforms work and that the tracking works. And my main focus at the moment has been cookieless. So obviously that's how I met you. I'm at the IAB event about all the cookieless changes coming up.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And yes, we did. It was actually one of my favorite events this year. It's a pretty good event and we got to meet. So a pretty good success overall. And one of my favorite questions that I always start interviews with is asking what do you think is the advantage of being a woman in this industry or in your role? Basically, what is your superpower? I think often we focus on the negatives. So I always want to start with a positive.
Yeah, no, there definitely is advantages. I think for me, the main one is it helps you stand out. So if you are the only woman in the room or there's only a few of you, it makes you very memorable. People always seem to remember my name. A, because I'm one of the few females, B, I think because of my accent as well. But I think that's good to stand out in different scenarios. And then I think the more deeper advantage is when you're developing technology or solutions, it's good to have perspectives from all demographics. So, both men and women, obviously different ethnicities as well, so that it's not just a room of guys being like, oh yeah, let's do this and getting really excited about the solution and then maybe not thinking about some of the other impacts on people who aren't them, basically. So you just spoke about AI and things like that really needs a lot of ethical oversight as well. So I think that can be good. I'm not saying women are more ethical than men. I'm just saying it's good to have different perspectives so that things aren't missed out in discussions and considerations aren't missed out when things are being designed.
I completely agree. And we've seen a lot of technological solutions where, for example, it was just men and then they were not the best fit for women. And I think they just started testing cars safety for with women dummies as well, because we have different physiology.
Oh, yes. Yeah, there's a lot of that, like even healthcare, a lot of medicines and things haven't been designed with a female body, but yeah, that's a different conversation, I guess. But yeah, it's just good to be in the design process. You can add your feedback, different perspective that maybe they just wouldn't have thought about before. So I think that's good.
Absolutely. And that's kind of also the value of having really diverse teams, and that we've seen the value in really diverse teams, having those different mindsets and coming up with more innovative solutions, or at least ones that are better for more people.
Exactly. Yeah.
For something really positive, we'll go into something a bit negative, but I think it's really important to talk about. Not necessarily negative, but I think that what I found doing this process of interviewing, I discovered that a lot of the time it makes you feel really less alone, because you see that your challenges have been shared by other women or other people, and that makes you feel a bit more validated in the way that you feel and a bit less alone. It's like it's you alone struggling through it, and it's just we're all struggling through it, and maybe we can share what are the main challenges that you've struggled with, and see who else, probably some people in the audience have also struggled with the same thing, and what was your way of overcoming it.
Yeah, no, definitely. I totally agree with your validation point. I think that makes a massive difference because it can be a bit isolating sometimes. And maybe you're trying to explain it to your male manager who's like, oh, don't worry about it. I'm like, no, I think there's a problem. But anyway, I'll give a few examples. I think sometimes it is just being taken seriously. So part of my job is advising people to add things to their websites or their apps or whatever it is. And then sometimes in the room, you might have a person who doesn't really rate your opinion. Why is this? Maybe younger as well can be part of the problem. Tell me what to do with my website. I'm not listening to this. And I've been in situations where I've been recommending things and then they have asked like for a meal to present or come back tomorrow with a meal guy to validate what I'm saying. So we've had to like rearrange the meeting, get a guy to come in and be like, yeah, that is the right solution actually. So I've had a few of that, and one of the funny examples I always use is I had a guy in my team who I managed. So I was saying, do this is the right solution. And then the people in the meeting were like, and what do you think, to the guy who was my junior, just because he's a guy, basically. So it was just, I get that sometimes. To be honest, it's few and far between. I think most people, especially in London, are quite modern. They will, you know, address you with respect and take your solutions on board, and not just completely derail it because you're a female. But every now and again, there is sometimes this kind of, I don't believe what she's saying, like, how does she know anything about it? So I think that is something that, you know, a few of us face, being taken seriously. But I don't know about overcoming it. Sometimes in those situations, with the power dynamic maybe between a client and an agency, and just a client and a business in general, sometimes you just have to get the guy to come in and be like, yeah, that was the right solution. And then over time, you kind of wear them down, so they sort of start respecting you then eventually, and then eventually they will start taking your word for it. So you have to be really patient. And I say that, you know, like really lightheartedly. That is actually quite a difficult process, because it's very frustrating when you're in a meeting and someone is just like, I don't believe anything that she's saying. So it can be quite, yeah, you have to be a bit resilient. And I think resilience is something that you build up over time, because you've been in a few of those situations before. Yeah, it's definitely not easy for people, especially the first few times of it happening, because it can be a bit embarrassing in many ways, because you're trying to perform your job and you feel like, is it me? Is the way I'm talking? Is it and then you're like, no, it's this guy. He's the guy with the problem. So, but yeah, I think that, and then I guess to overcome it, like you said, with validation. So if you think someone is disrespecting you because of your gender or whatever, it's kind of like send all the people in the meeting, like, did you notice that? Is that me? Am I being weird? And then they're like, no, I noticed that as well. He's done that behavior before. And then you sort of kind of being validated in that way, and like say the problem's him, not you. So I think that's something that would be my biggest challenge, but lucky enough it doesn't happen a lot. So yeah, I'm quite lucky in where I work at the moment. People do take my opinion quite seriously because I've been there for so long. I've kind of built up that respect. But yeah, it's just something to bear in mind. Sometimes you have to win people over quite significantly.
I mean, it's not easy, especially if you like say something and then like that's dismissed, and then there's a man saying the same thing 5 minutes later, and like, yes, that's a great idea, and you just like, okay,
yeah, it's wasting everyone's time. But if that's, yeah, it's a weird one. But yeah, it definitely happens a lot, I think. And I have a lot of friends who work in like academia or other kind of sort of male-dominated fields. Happens everywhere, I think. And you read about it online and different places. So it does happen. And unfortunately, you have to be quite resilient to just kind of push through it and have a bit of a debrief after the meeting to like get through the feelings of it all, I guess. So that, yeah, you can just reassure yourself it's not you. It is actually, yeah, that person's got the problem.
I'm actually really curious. Do other men in the room notice that behavior, or for them this is just, oh, this is perfectly normal, they're not doing anything wrong, and only women kind of like have this little tick in their head? It's like, no, I clocked that.
Yeah, no, I think it's a mixed bag. I've had some really great male colleagues who will, you know, like be an ally and be amazing and be like, it's exactly what she said, not trying to like pretend that they're coming up with it on the spot, just being like, no, actually, just what Ruth said. So that, you know, that's amazing. And then maybe some of them are unaware, like just they wouldn't have think about it because maybe they've never experienced it before. But yeah, I think I don't know if that answers your question, but I think there's some great guys out there who are great allies and who'll just be like, no, like, but then there's some who will be like, I have thought of a great idea, thanks for asking me, and like take all the credit for it. So yeah, you just have to watch out for those kind of people.
I mean, I was mostly quite curious to see if there's main colleagues in the room, will they even notice the fact that they're asking for a male validation rather than asking a woman, or for them this is just such a normal thing to do, and then you don't even clock it. Because I think it depends on also how sensitive and how aware you are to the problem, so you then see it. And I think that sometimes we're almost blind to it, so we don't notice that this is happening.
Yeah, 100%. I think unconscious bias is something that's quite interesting, I think. I was thinking back before this interview about books like LinkedIn and things like that, where all the statistics about when a woman speaks, she's more likely to be interrupted by a man or a woman in the meeting. Like, it's not just guys who can just, you know, show discriminatory behavior. yeah, I think we all have unconscious bias. So we're all, men and women, need to be sort of, like I said, clocking on to what's happening and trying to be like, let's go back to what Ruth was saying, or let's repeat what Emma was saying. I think Emma was onto something there. So it's about allyship, I guess, in many ways. But yeah, most people, well, I'll say most people, some people will never recognize that because maybe they've never faced any kind of discrimination, and anytime they speak, people listen, like that they've never maybe had to overcome that. But most people, I'd say most human beings are good. So most people have some level of empathy where they will notice and they'll see how annoyed you are afterwards. And you're like, I'm not brilliant at hiding afterwards how I feel about things. So the most people are empathetic and will pick up on it and maybe try and help the next time as well.
Fantastic. And what would be some of your tip, which you found to be most empowering in your career, or really kept you going? Because this sounds to be like a few meetings where you want to really like slam the door and kind of like leave me alone after.
Yeah, no, I think that's it's an interesting question. I think to keep going, at the end of the day, we all want to work. I've always wanted to be successful. Always want, so I think you just have your own. I've always had my own personal motivation, I guess, to just push on through things, I guess. But I think in terms of career, I think one thing that has been quite useful is trying to be more positive, right? So not toxic positivity where, you think everything's amazing all the time, but, trying to just kind of like simple things. Like if someone asks you how you are, I used to be like, oh, not too bad. But now I'm like, oh, I'm good. How are you? Because in work, it's good to kind of have a positive demeanor as much as possible, even if stressful things are happening, even if you've just come out of that meeting where, something kind of negative has happened. So I think that's one of my overall career tips is like trying to be a bit more positive. I think that's helped me a lot when I sort of embraced it a little bit more. And then one piece of advice someone gave to me is like, your value is your intellectual property, not your work rate, which I found quite hard to get my head around because I think when I first started out, I was so busy trying to like work all the time, do long hours and like show that I was the most dedicated person. But I think over the years, I've just kind of been like, no, my value is actually my experience and my IP, not the work rate necessarily. Like, you can still do your normal hours. You don't have to be like overly proving yourself, because sometimes maybe if you are a woman in the space, maybe you want to overwork to like really get to the top and you feel like you have to do that or something. But I think that's not true anymore. I think that you just have to back yourself and know that your value is your IP, literally. So I think that's been something that's helped a lot. And then I think that's the two main ones. You just have, unfortunately, you just have to back yourself, which isn't always easy when things maybe are going a bit off the rails or a bit sad or something. But you just have to keep positive, and then it normally comes back. The positivity comes back afterwards. I sound like some kind of strange like wellness guru or something, but I think it is important to keep that up. And obviously deal with issues that do arise, separately, but in your overall demeanor in the office, try and keep things upbeat.
I think it's a general good tip for life. I'll definitely try to be a bit more upbeat.
Yeah, and it's not always easy because I kind of go towards being a bit sarcastic and a bit like that sometimes. I'm like, no, you're in work. You have to be your work self. So you have to be a bit more upbeat, because that's what people want. Work's hard enough sometimes. You don't want to be surrounded by negativity. You want a bit of, what is it, radiators, not drains, and all that kind of thing. So I think that's good. I guess that's not female specific advice. It's just like you said, life advice. But I think it has helped me a lot when I started to go towards that a bit more over time.
I can see that. I just bring the dog and hope the dog kind of like makes it.
That's the perfect thing to do. Yeah.
A different tactic, yeah.
Well, it is it's the best. The best addition to any meeting could possibly be bringing a dog, I think. So yeah, definitely.
I'm glad my tactics somewhat like I believe in them. Like, just bring a dog, it will be fine. Also, every time you feel a bit down, just hug the dog. You'll feel a bit better. But yeah, I think that's definitely a me solution. I'm also kind of curious because we talked about like what do you do to empower yourself and how you can help empower yourself. But how do you think, what is the role that, for example, women have in empowering other women?
Yeah, I think it's actually quite a hard question to answer, because I think like obviously there is a role. I think it goes back to validation first and foremost, like you said, that if something discriminatory is happening, feel a bit weird about someone's behavior, that you've someone to soundboard off that and they'll understand at a different level. Having mentors and things like that in the company can be really useful, to sort of have like a bigger view on what your problem is. It's very useful, and they can be men or women, but sometimes if it's a woman, you know, maybe they'll understand your specific issues a bit more because maybe they've had the exact same thing happen to them. So that can be really useful. I think, you know, leading by example is important. So I don't know if I'm inspiring any other people in the office, but I try to help if I can. I was living in a meeting the other day where because everyone's got different roles. So my role's more technical and some people are more like on the client facing side. And then they were all saying, all the girls in the call were like, oh, I could never understand that. I don't get it. And I was like, just give yourself more time and you will. So I think I've always had a problem with that where, you know, people kind of close themselves off to learning things. And so I don't know, maybe I'm being a bit strict with them, but I'm trying to push them to learn it, I guess, because they can. They're just like, think they can't in a strange way. So I don't know if that's uplifting or not, but I think sometimes people can put blockers on themselves on their limitations. So it's nice to try and be like, you don't have to have that, just keep going. But yeah, I think it's just representation. It's nice seeing females in senior positions that can help inspire yourself or the younger girls coming up as well. So representation matters, that famous saying, but I think it does. So yeah, I don't know if that's great advice, but because I think what I'm trying to say is I don't want to get into like tokenism or just extreme positive discrimination. Like I've always kind of tried to avoid that, because ultimately that was a disservice in the long run, where, you know, then people are like, oh, you're just here to make up whatever quota that they're talking about. So you want to like, yeah, so some of those schemes aren't always the best. But yeah, I think just a positive work environment, like you said, having an environment that's supportive, that might notice some of these issues to help you progress and things like that. I don't know if that makes sense.
I think it does, and I think that I actually had a conversation about tokenism back when I was doing a panel at Cannes about this topic.
Oh, wow,
and I was hosting the panel there, and one of the questions that I was asked to add is view about tokenism and like negative versus positive, because quotas and reverse discrimination, like there is a reason why you do that. Correct discrimination, it's there for a reason. However, there is a problem with tokenism, and there is a negative side to it, and there's a big negative side to it. And when you force someone to get to a role just because of their gender or just because of their ethnicity, sometimes they then are not taken seriously, and what it represents also to the environment and the people growing within the business. They're seeing this person, oh, this is the best I can aspire to, and they don't really have any real power, which is not really inspiring in the first place. So we need to be really careful and make sure that we don't just give roles because we need to fill a quota, but and give them real roles. There's a lot of capable women. There's a lot of capable people from outside of what we will call like from different backgrounds and different experiences. And it's mostly keeping yourself accountable to giving them space rather than necessarily force it. And that accountability that we need to enforce on ourselves is where it really maybe does the trick. And also where we source the candidates, where we do it. Do we give opportunities for growth? Do we also are trying to force people to be exactly what we are because we think that's right? Or do we understand where it's okay to have differences? And the fact that women and men are not exactly the same, that's okay. We don't need everyone to behave exactly in one way. There's advantages and disadvantages. And that goes to any other I can't even call it minority because female, like women are not minority, but it goes to any other group of
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Yeah. Yeah, because sometimes it's a structural problem. Yeah, so then no matter how many quotas you have, it's actually the structure of the business is why people are not progressing. Because, like you said, when people think of a leader, the CEO guy, all of that kind of stuff in their mind. So in their mind's eye. So yeah, I think that you're totally right there. It's about what you think a good leader looks like, behaves like. So. Yeah, that could be a big thing, but that's big institutional change and subconscious, unconscious bias, and it's a hard one to solve. But yeah, I agree. That's the whole thing that we're trying to achieve, I guess. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's a lot of the time the workplaces were designed in the first place for men, and why women struggle maybe a bit because of this. The structure itself was designed for men, and now we need to maybe unpick some of those structures and challenge them and say, are they right? Do they actually facilitate for diverse work environment? And they need to change? And what does change looks like? And that is hard. Every change is hard. But that's definitely a big issue that we probably will not cover in the few minutes.
Yeah, it gets a bit overwhelming when you start thinking about it. But I think it's like incremental over time and representation over time, and then it hopefully will all fall into place in a few years. Sometimes you read like crazy statistics where it's like for women to have equal pay to men, it'll be like 2100 or whatever. So but hopefully that's not the case. Yeah, hopefully it'll be sooner than that. And obviously every country and everything's different as well. So but it's I'm really interested in the topic in general. There's so many good books and articles and even like some really good Instagram things you can follow, like to like understand it a bit more. Because for me, as I work in a data team, sometimes you're trying to explain the issues with women in the workplace, and people are like, "Oh yeah, stop complaining." But if you have all the data to prove it, and not the Lean In book is good, not great, but some of the data in it's amazing. Where there's real statistics, real research to show the issues. And even showing maybe the financial impact of not being diverse as well. So, because unfortunately, some people don't care about the emotional, like pastoral side. They want to see numbers on a spreadsheet. So you can actually show that this will increase, profitability and different things if you embrace it. That's one of my other points. It's good to have those numbers in your head on hand to like help as well.
That's really valid. And I think that I'm sure that other people would love the recommendations on any book, good books, good articles, and good Instagram accounts to follow. So please do feel free to share. I know I would love to see them. And I will share them, distribute them when we distribute the episode as well.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's your point about validation is just spot on. That's what it is, because there'll be like funny little jokes maybe on Instagram, like, "Oh, this happened to me," and then you're like, "I can relate to that." And then so I like that, because sometimes humor can help as well. Not all the time. Some things are very serious, but sometimes it can help get your message across as well. I'll try and follow up with some if I can find them, the links. Yeah,
really appreciate it. And last quick question. What do you think is the most crucial leadership lesson you've learned?
Oh, that's really hard. Because it is an evolving process. So I honestly don't know. Like, I could say something about delegation, but I still haven't mastered that fully. So that would be because I think ultimately I still stand by my original concept of lead by example. So don't be expecting people to do things that you actually wouldn't do yourself. So I think that's one of my main ones. I'll try and be concise and just say that. And maybe the positivity message that not always possible to be super positive all the time, but it helps a lot, and it helps get people on board if you're trying to inspire your own team or get other teams to take on your recommendations. It's good to have a bit more of a positive demeanor and that kind of thing to help with it.
Brilliant. That's really good advice. I think that leading by example is something I really stand by, so I can appreciate it. And delegation is hard. So I don't think you ever master it completely. I think it's a work in progress. I don't think you should be harsh on yourself. I think one of my lessons.
Yeah, it's something that's probably my worst. Not my worst, but one of the things I want to get better at. Yeah.
Being kinder. So one good thing you say like to yourself a day of like, you did really well on this today.
Oh, okay, yeah, affirmations and things like that. Yeah, that could work.
Thank you so much for joining me today, Ruth. I really, really appreciate it.